So the Forde report is finally being covered in the mainstream media aside from Al Jazeera. Channel 4 picked up the story. Take a look.
If this is a standalone complaint where an apology was given within hours, I think, if not minutes, I can see no reason why that couldn't be dealt with pretty promptly. I think given her service to the party and the appalling racism that she's suffered throughout her political career, I think it would be a terrible shame if this dragged on.
The black MPs I've spoken to don't want to speak on camera. They worry that if they do, they fear they'll lose the whip.
Now, can you believe that? Some black MPs are scared to show their faces just in case they get sacked or punished by their leadership. That just shows how little Keir Starmer and the leadership cares about anti-blackness in the party. Now, we know all of this. We've seen the Forde report. We've seen how other forms of racism has been weaponized, and we know that there's a hierarchy of racism. That hierarchy of racism essentially puts the importance of anti-Semitism above anti-blackness, Islamophobia, Gypsy, Roma and traveller racism. So we know it's all there. When you see the response of the Labour Party, the way for years they've essentially covered up anti-blackness. For years, they've allowed those on the Labour right to treat people like Diane Abbott disgustingly. Some of the comments that were directed at her were abusive. A lot of the concerns of anti-blackness did come from the left. I think that some of the Labour right feel that the issues of anti-blacknism was raised from the Labour left, and in a weird, sick way, they felt it was ceding ground to the left. Now, of course, that's not true, but these Blairites, that's the way they operate. They put fighting the faction of the left above anything. That's why they've weaponized anti-Semitism. That's why they're downplaying other forms of racism. Now, one unnamed MP said this: "Despite our party's claims to be anti-racist, we, our members and supporters, are losing faith in the ability and commitment of this leadership to tackle the issues raised in the Forde report, and we demand urgent action." Now, Labour officially put out a response and they said, "The Labour Party is fully committed to tackling racist and discriminatory attitudes wherever they arise in whatever section of the party." These are just words, no actions behind it. Sure, Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer can get on one knee for a photo op, which looks really awkward, by the way. But people have short memories. Remember when Keir Starmer was talking about Black Lives Matter, and he said, well, it's not a movement, it's a moment, and he tried downplaying it. Because Starmer is a cop, his policies, when he becomes Prime Minister, will be very anti-black when it comes to the police. So he has no interest in structural changes. Maybe changes on the surface to just hush people up, maybe hush the media up, but he doesn't really care. It's also telling that Martin Forde has been ignored by the party for years. When the Forde report came out, which was commissioned by Keir Starmer, and then clearly when he found things in the report that he didn't like, he ignored him. Forde said, no one from the Labour Party really contacted me. That then prompted him to go to Al Jazeera to talk about it. And now finally it's been covered in the mainstream media. Now, Martin Forde brought up Diane Abbott. Those comments were incredibly fair. And I covered this before. And I think I got a bit of pushback on some things I said, which is fair enough. My position, and my position continues to this day, is that Diane Abbott's comments were really, really bad. And I think it warranted a suspension. However, a suspension doesn't equate expelling them as a member. I think it's important, if you do care about tackling racism and discrimination, that no matter who says it, no matter who says really messed up stuff, they should be investigated. Now, for me, I would say the investigation should probably find that what Diane Abbott was trying to say was she was trying to talk about the hierarchy of racism in an incredibly clumsy way, and the investigation should show, well, this is an MP, a black MP, who has been the most abused person in Parliament, has had a long campaign of fighting racism, standing up for black community. She's been a brilliant champion for that, and she made a really bad mistake. That doesn't warrant her from being kicked out of the party. She should stay as an MP. It also would be really bad optically for a white Labour leader who's been accused of not addressing anti-blackness in the party, kicking out a long-standing black MP who has fought against anti-blackness his whole life and is the first, or was the first, black female MP in Parliament. Now, for me, upon reflection, I'd say in the original video when I talked about Diane Abbott, I said I didn't think the apology was good enough. I think I've probably changed my view on that because I was probably a bit harsh. To be honest, any apology, anyone can say, oh, it's not really good enough. But what more could she have done? She said, I unequivocally apologise for the words I said, and I don't mean it. So I do admit that I was probably a bit too harsh on that front. And to be honest, I got response from those that watch this channel. And people watch this channel, I listen. I don't listen to the centrist melts or the right-wingers or the Labourite on Twitter. They're irrelevant. But when it's people who watch this channel, when it's people on the left, you have good opinions and your heart is in the right place. So when I listen to that, I reflect. So I hold my hands up when I say that I think I was a bit too harsh when I talked about the apology of Diane Abbott. I do think the suspension was warranted, but I think the end goal should be we investigate it, we find that Diane Abbott is clearly not a racist, and she can come back and serve her constituents. Now that would actually be a pretty good move by Starmer, because now we know the Forde report is getting into the mainstream media just a little bit, and there's talks of anti-blackness becoming into the mainstream narrative. Starmer, by saying Diane Abbott can continue as an MP, might throw it a bit of an olive branch. But still, fundamentally, it's all on the surface. It's not real structural changes, because Keir Starmer's politics does not align with fighting anti-blackness. To fight anti-black racism, and all forms of racism, it doesn't need words to say, oh, we care about discrimination, we're going to work together to root it out. What it needs, especially the context of anti-blackness, it needs really thought out structural policies to change the system we're in. So the system we're in at the moment, when it comes to the black community, they're disproportionately targeted by the police, they're disproportionately targeted by the justice system. And when it comes to inequality, the black community are always at the bottom of the list when it comes to poverty, for example. So if you truly care about fighting anti-blackness, you would have to have huge structural policies, things that Keir Starmer unequivocally does not support. We know Keir Starmer wants to get into power just to be Prime Minister. He doesn't want to change anything. He won't even change the most right-wing Tory policies such as anti-protest bills. He's not going to do that. So are we then supposed to believe that Keir Starmer is really going to tackle anti-racism, really going to tackle anti-black racism, when one, he won't implement the structural policies? I don't think he even has an idea what the structural policies are, let alone kick out the bullies in the Labour Party that treated black MPs like dog shit? The answer is obviously no. So while it is good to see that Martin Forde is getting some airtime, on Channel 4 News, out of all the mainstream media outlets, Channel 4 is probably the least worst. That's not saying much. But nothing's really going to fundamentally change. The first step to really tackle anti-racism, especially anti-blackness in the Labour Party, is to get rid of Keir Starmer.